the transmission. So people need to be trained in communication. That job well alongside being able to give good information.
Caroline Channing, ProPublica. Thanks so much.
For having me.
The coronavirus pandemic has put every country to the test. Whether measuring infection rates, mortality, or unemployment, the results vary dramatically. Here in the U.S., the government is weighing whether or not to provide another stimulus package, as more than 38 million people have filed for unemployment since mid-March. In Germany, the number of people out of work during stay-at-home orders surged. A state-funded short-term program there helped many avoid layoffs. It's a work-sharing agreement that some here in the U.S. are hoping makes
Death is all for one.
Weekend's Christopher Booker has more.
With the passage of the landmark CARES Act in March, the headline was, financial relief was on its way for millions of Americans. As companies slashed jobs, the nearly $2 trillion relief bill meant that on top of a one-time stimulus check, an additional $600 a week in federal unemployment insurance would be made available for those suddenly out of work. But buried deep in the document was something else. Additional support for little-known state programs that can help businesses avoid having to lay people off in the first place.
About WorkShare because I actually started reporting a story about the unemployment system in my capacity as a journalist at the LA Times. Right at the same time I was working on that, our management came to us and said that they wanted $2 million in cuts from our newsroom.
Matt Pierce is a reporter for the Los Angeles Times and an elected guild member of the newspaper's union.
There are other programs out there like PPP that small businesses have applied for to keep workers on their payroll and sometimes keep them working. Too big to be eligible for that. We also didn't have access to the Treasury program for mid-sized business loans, so we reached for the next closest tool, which was the WorkShare program.
California is one of 25 states, along with the District of Columbia, that have what is known as a WorkShare or short-term compensation program. These programs allow companies to avoid layoffs in exchange for a reduction in employee hours. A percentage of the employees' lost wages are offset with unemployment insurance, which comes out of state funds. But under the CARES Act, those payouts are being reimbursed by the federal government.
We had trouble actually finding other employers who had experience with this program. I mean, this was the craziest thing when I was making phone calls.
I wonder who that is.
Labor people in California, they didn't have much experience with it.
But Pierce and the Guild did figure it out and convinced management to agree to a 12-week WorkShare program. In hours for everyone by 20%, the agreement saved 80%.
I did make a mistake with this member, a couple of them, and I went overboard, man. I'm not gonna lie, man.
It really seems like a win-win for all of us.
But I'll give him that, man. I fucked up.
Susan Hausman is the vice president.
But he didn't take over the alliance. That's far from what happened.
The Michigan organization was founded 75 years ago to study policy-related issues of employment and unemployment.
Causes of this recession were not economic in nature.
No, I gave the alliance, at least that played this game, I gave it over to my right-hand man. It had nothing to do with Hells. Hells was another conversation. That was... But I picked out the wrong members that I thought were spies, and I fucked up, man. I'm not gonna lie. I confess, man. What can I say? I'm sorry. I don't think sorry is enough, really, to be honest with you. But I am sorry. That's why these members I have in this War and Order game, my deputies, because you can have deputies, officers, and elites, and then regular members. And I tell them all, you don't want to be paranoid, man. It's not a good thing.
It was just within the last several years that 9 of the states, including mine, Michigan, introduced this program. We were in expansion. So I would imagine that very few employers, when this hit, quite this recession, knew that.
There are those who argue the lack of work share is not just about policy, but something much more complicated. And this can be seen nowhere more than in the difference in unemployment between the United States and Germany. At the end of April, the German unemployment rate was 5.8%, while in the US, it was 14.7%.
What's the difference? Of course, culture's the difference.
Chris Kohler is a labor scholar and professor of law and philosophy at Boston College.
So what has made the difference? So-called Kurzarbeit or short work system. What Kurzarbeit does is give an incentive to employers and employees to continue to work, continue to train, and the government will subsidize that. The idea being this is a lot cheaper than having a large body of unemployed people who end up, they're out of the labor market too long, they have difficulty getting back into it.
According to the German IFO Institute for Economic Research, half of all German firms, covering as many as 10 million German workers, are currently utilizing Kurzarbeit.
Do something as structurally comprehensive as done require a lot of change in our attitudes. Can never look at a model and buy it and take it home. It won't work that way. Need a certain culture to do it. There's a lot we could learn from it.
Do you anticipate employment policy will change in the U.S. in response to this crisis?
I think at some point it absolutely has to. There are too many people who have literally no protections at all. It's clear to me that we need a new way to think about
Oh, damn.
how we go over it.
I can see from firsthand experience now, not as a journalist, but as someone, representing my coworker, why it's so difficult to
Come
promote these
on,
programs
man.
in the U.S.
Seriously?
It's easier to lay people off. There's not a culture of spreading around the pain to protect people in these times of temporary economic crunches. So we're thankful that this is here. We're just try to survive this round of the fight, get on to the next battle, which could be 12 weeks from now, 6 months from now, a year from now.
The CARES Act funds programs through the end of 2020. The current LA Times deal lasts until the end of July. Pierce is unclear what happens after. His phone has been ringing. The calls coming from other newsrooms across the country looking for advice.
He got me.
Christopher Booker has more on work sharing at our Instagram page. While the
It's not bad, though.
effects of COVID-19 are still being studied, research shows that there is a disproportionate impact on marginalized communities.
350,000.
Activists behind the in-person climate protests that were gaining momentum in the last few years are pivoting to keep the public's focus on both crises. They're finding online ways to organize and continue their advocacy. NewsHour Weekend's Yvette Feliciano reports.
Last year, high school youth and New York-based indigenous climate activists
Man, I got plenty of money. I don't need money, man. Oh my gosh, it's just loading me with money. I've got billions of money. I don't need billions. No, actually, I don't have a billion, do I? No, no. I got millions. I've got millions.
And I got 600 kids to walk out. And on the streets is where I met my fellow organizers from around New York City. And ever since we got together, started organizing, and got 300,000 people to strike on September 20th.
Wow, that guy is off the chain.
10 million to the streets
Whoa.
in September. Bastida and climate activists around the world were gearing up to do more in-person actions for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day.
I don't recognize anyone in
Then,
there.
the coronavirus pandemic began and stay-at-home orders were issued.
It really disrupted kind of like our upward trend of having impact in different places, but it united us in a different way, because climate activism is about community. So we shifted all of our organizing that's going to happen in the streets to online activism.
Focus on online environmental activism has only grown. For Earth Day on April 22nd, climate justice organizations like 350.org helped organize a 72-hour live stream event, which had over 4.8
Yeah,
million
like if you
views
got
on the-
kids, bro, don't let them come here, okay? I'm telling you, bro, do not let them play this game.
Mara Tolles O'Laughlin is the North America
And
director
all
for
you kids, if you
350.org.
happen to be in
The group created
BWG,
online
don't play
templates
this
for different
game.
ways of organizing
Yeah.
around the climate, such as virtual banner
I only
pages,
know of
online training, and outreach
a couple.
tutorials.
You get people who aren't in the same place
One,
to connect
actually,
about big ideas
for a
and
fact,
create
that's
space
a
for
kid in our
conversations.
alliance.
Some of
And
that's just plain old education about what the facts are, resources and
I don't think he
toolkits,
ever watches the
templates for how
YouTube.
to communicate
I don't think
with
he knows
your,
English. He's from somewhere
representative.
else.
So figuring out
The
what
game
it
has
is
an
people
automatic
really
translator
are
in
is
it,
just
so
an extension of what we have been doing as an international global organization that's been working on climate for over a decade.
May 14th, the organization gathered more than 600 people for an online discussion that included the relationship between climate change and COVID-19. Groups are also finding new ways of taking direct social action.
We have pivoted to organizing in a way that is totally consistent, keeping those distancing requirements in place.
Priya Chatterjee is the executive director of the U.S. Climate Action Network.
yeah, man,
a
why does it
coalition
do
of
that? I
hundreds
don't know
of
why it does that.
organizations active on climate change.
We just launched something called Arm in Arm, where any people, anywhere they are in the country, can take leadership and start doing what we are calling disruptive humanitarianism. Whether that means, getting orchards in the way of pipelines, or closing off streets so kids can go outside for the first time in a month. You don't actually need to gather a lot of people to disrupt systems.
The network also started an online campaign called the People's Bailout. It urges citizens to call their elected representatives to demand they address the social inequities of climate change, which activists say now risk being intensified by the federal government's response to COVID-19.
If you look at who has been most badly affected by COVID-19, is Indigenous, Black, Latinx communities, the very same communities hit worst by the climate crisis. Even geographically overlap. If you look at Louisiana, or parts of New York, Detroit, these are places that have been really badly hit by environmental injustices and climate injustices.
Youth climate activist Shie Bastida says, if nothing else, the COVID-19 pandemic has made the threat of climate change to marginal communities clear.
I was born and raised in Mexico, and when I was 13 years old, my town flooded heavily, and not only that, but the waste that we had from a lot of the neighboring factories spilled over on the streets. So it was pollution and the effects of the climate crisis combined into something completely made my town unstable economically. So ever since, that was like my wake-up call.
What COVID has done is rip the Band-Aid off and let people know that if you don't have access and you don't have resources, then you don't have a response to a crisis that will only continue to be compounded as climate makes pandemics more likely. So, for example, in this moment, we were planning before now to focus on flood and fire season for people that are stable around what they could do in COVID. They will be forced to consider whether they can continue to shelter in place in places where there are floods, where there are fires, where it's just too hot, or electricity may go out because of brownouts.
A new study this week by a group of international scientists found that global carbon dioxide emissions dropped by 17% in April during the coronavirus lockdown. Bastida says it shouldn't take a health crisis to heal the planet.
Because it is actually harming a lot of communities. And the coronavirus pandemic is only stopping mass production of things. We can achieve low carbon emissions by switching to renewable energy to keep fighting for climate justice.
This coming week, 2 American astronauts will blast off on a mission to the International Space Station from Cape Canaveral. It's the first launch from U.S. soil with astronauts on board since the Space Shuttle program ended in 2011. And the first time a private company, SpaceX, not NASA, will control the mission using its Crew Dragon capsule on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Liftoff is scheduled for 4:33 Eastern Time on Wednesday afternoon. That's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. For the latest news updates, visit pbs.org/newshour. And on this Memorial Day weekend, thank you to those who lost their lives in military service. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and have a good night.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Bernard and Irene Schwartz, Sue and Edgar Wackenheim III, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Rosalind P. Walter, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg, Charles Rosenblum. We try to live in the moment, to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments.
When it comes to wireless, Consumer Cellular gives its customers the choice. Our no-contract plans give you as much or as little talk, text, and data as you want. And our U.S.-based customer service team is on hand to help. To learn more, go to consumercellular.tv.
Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Judy Woodruff. On the NewsHour tonight, tariffs, tweets, and turmoil. President Trump's threats to China send markets tumbling as the embattled chair of the Federal Reserve warns trade tensions could weaken the economy. Then black skies over Brazil, accusations, international outrage, and calls for action as the Amazon burns. And from anecdote to analysis, getting to the bottom of how U.S. foreign aid actually works to help lift people out of extreme poverty.
I was really struck by how little they knew about whether they were generating an impact. And there really was just nothing resembling evidence and data that was being used to inform these kinds of decisions.
Plus, it's Friday. Mark Shields and Ramesh Ponnuru are here to analyze President Trump's attacks on China and the U.S. Federal Reserve Chair, the state of the 2020 Democratic presidential field, and the legacy of conservative philanthropist David Koch. All that and more on tonight's PBS.
Damn it.
The trade war between the United States and China escalated today, sending the financial markets into a tailspin. It all came as President Trump leveled his fiercest criticism yet at the chairman of the Federal Reserve. China first announced it is imposing new tariffs on $75 billion worth of American goods. Soon after, the president said he wanted U.S. companies to stop doing business with China, tweeting, "Our great American companies are hereby ordered to immediately start looking for an alternative to China."
He's got
average
me.
plunged today, losing 623 points at the end of the day. It closed at 25,628, a drop of more than 2%. After the markets closed, the president announced his own retaliation, even higher tariffs on $550 billion worth of Chinese goods that will kick in during the fall. At the same time, Mr. Trump used unprecedented language today to attack Fed Chair Jay Powell for not clearly announcing another interest rate cut is coming. "My only question," he said in a tweet, "is who is our bigger enemy, Jay Powell or Chairman Xi?" A reference to the leader of China. Before
Got
those
him, though.
tweets, Powell had signaled that the Fed
Nice.
may cut rates in the fall, but also warned of risks from the trade war. It has been
I should have rushed him.
dramatic day.
I thought he was gonna make me
Joins us now.
fish him, man, chase him.
And she's
But he
a
didn't. He
columnist
just
at
came
the
around.
Washington
I
Post.
should have went
So,
ahead
Catherine,
for
I
it.
hardly know where to begin, but let
Oh,
me
well.
start by asking you about the effect of these tariffs announced by China in the morning, and then at the end of the day, the President Trump announcing higher tariffs on China. What does all this mean for the economy?
Man, there's.
So China's retaliatory tariffs, which is what they were.
I can't
they
use
were in
anything,
response to tariffs that
man,
Trump
with that
himself
money.
had
I can't
announced
do
earlier
anything
this
with
month
it.
that will go into effect in September and December. China's retaliation, its tit-for-tat retaliation, was widely expected. We didn't know exactly.
I can't get
what
anything
form
with
it
the
would
money.
take. So that
It's
in
over.
and of itself probably won't change the narrative or feelings of confidence or lack thereof all that much.
And they want you to
However,
spend
the
money,
question is, would things
gold
escalate
for money.
further?
What?
And that is what we saw at the end of the day. That's what markets were worried about throughout the day after Trump himself initially tweeted that some sort of vengeance was in the offing, and you can imagine that that in and of itself will weigh on confidence as well as, of course, raise costs for importers, retailers, consumers, manufacturers, and other Americans.
And then you combine that, Catherine, with the speech today that
abuse
Jay Powell,
hour
the chairman of the
all the
Fed,
time in this chat.
made at this gathering meeting in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where he talked about the slowdown that the Fed is expecting, to what extent he's expecting, they're expecting that. And he coupled that with the difficulty that he suggested the Fed has in dealing with trade difficulties. And I'm just going to quote quickly. He said there are, however, no recent precedents to guide any policy response to the current situation. Moreover, while monetary policy is a powerful tool, it can't provide a settled rule book for international trade. What does that signal?
What that means is that the Federal Reserve knows that its job is to do right by the economy, right? To fulfill its dual mandate of maximum employment and stable prices, but it can't control everything. And in particular, it can't control risks such as policy decisions that the White House is making regarding escalating trade tensions, not only with China, but with other countries around the world. So what Chairman Powell was trying to convey is that people still should be confident in the trajectory of the economy, and while there are risks out there, they are aware of those risks, they will do their best to adjust policy in response to them, but they can't be sort of holy grail kind of backstop.
Yes, we are blues.
They can't counter every single possible risk, particularly ones that are sort of self-inflicted at this point.
But you layer on top of that President Trump's, I think the most vivid example of his criticism of Chairman Powell was today when he said, who's the greater enemy of the U.S., Chairman Powell, Jay Powell, or the head of China? What are we to make of this? What does this say to Americans, to the business community?
I think it says a few things. First of all, this is highly unprecedented on many levels, right? Chairman Powell was Trump's own pick. Powell, of course, is also at the politically independent central bank, and we need to bear in mind that historically, at least for the last several decades, the White House has had a norm of never commenting on Fed policy at all, let alone sort of cyberbullying, I guess, members of the Fed or threatening to fire them, as Trump himself has done. I think the way that markets might be interpreting all of this is with a bit of nervousness, because, again, the Fed is trying to convey that you can count on us, that whatever risks are out there, we will do our best to counter them. But at the same time, the president is trying to discredit the Fed, and one might argue sort of scapegoat them. I mean, he's explicitly said that, right? President Trump has said that any weaknesses, any frailties within the economy are the Fed's fault. So the Fed is in this very difficult position where they're trying to inspire confidence. They're trying to maintain both their actual political independence and their perceived political independence. And they want to make sure that if they go ahead and further cut rates, as Powell sort of suggested was likely during his speech today, that they are doing it because they think it's in the best interests of the economy and not because they're caving to political pressure.
And just finally, quickly, Catherine, when the president tweeted today that American companies, he said, I'm ordering American companies to stop doing business in China. Does he have the power to do that?
I am not aware of any authority that the president has to do that. He can make life more difficult, of course, for companies operating in China. And the American Chamber, or the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Retail Federation, and others have basically said it is, it's impossible, essentially, for us to forego these markets. It's impossible for us to reroute all of our supply chains, especially on short notice. And the fact that Trump is raising tariffs, escalating these trade wars, makes all of those decisions even more difficult. But no, they're not going to voluntarily leave these places if they haven't already.
All right, Catherine Rampell joining us on this pretty remarkable day in the financial markets and as we look at world trade. Catherine, thank you very much. This evening, President Trump will be leaving Washington for Southwest France for this weekend's G7 Summit of World Leaders. Our White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor is there ahead of the president's arrival. So hello, Yamiche. Given all that is going on today, it makes one wonder if these leaders are prepared.
Bro, that didn't credit me, bro. That 40,000.
The world leaders were already bracing for the president to be an unpredictable part of the G7 here in France, and now they're even more anxious given the fact that the president has gone after the Federal Reserve Chair, and he's now escalating the trade war with China, saying that he's going to be escalating tariffs on them. And the important thing to note is that President Trump has had several G7s. Last year, he refused to sign the joint communique that other members signed. As a result, the French President, Emmanuel Macron, said there won't even be a joint communique floated this year. That's really the president then changing the way that international organizations and international groups are functioning. The president also pushed for and successfully got added to the G7 schedule a meeting about global economies. President Trump wants to use that meeting to talk about how strong the American economy is and really talk about the fact that there isn't a recession coming, even though some economists are really worried about that. He wants to also say that European leaders need to be pushing their economies to grow faster, and that the U.S. is really a leader on the economic world stage.
And in fact, Yamiche, we know the world leaders are planning to talk about their concerns about a global slowdown. Do they have a plan in mind for what to do about that?
World leaders are very, very worried about the economic slowdowns that are happening all across the world. I've been talking to foreign experts about this, and they say not only is the U.S. looking at an economic slowdown, but there's China, there's Germany, there's Japan. All of those countries are looking down the line and seeing risky issues with their economy. The president doesn't have the same ideals as a lot of the world leaders that are coming here to France. A lot of them want to use the power of the meeting of the G7 to work on trade issues, to work on climate change. The president doesn't have the same views. So there are a lot of people saying that this is really the G6 plus one, which is the United States. There isn't right now a clear idea of what world leaders want to do to try to stop these economic
I need to get out there.
People really coming here with a lot of anxiety.
Time.
And finally, Yamiche, very quickly, we know they're also going to be talking about security issues around Russia, around Iran. Do they have a clear plan in mind for either one?
President Trump has been using misleading information about why Russia was kicked out of what used to be the G8. They were kicked out because they annexed Crimea, which was a sovereign part of the Ukraine. President Trump has been using the false claim that Russia was kicked out because President Trump got outsmarted. It's still unclear whether or not world leaders are going to be open to the idea of even talking about Russia coming back into the G7, because experts tell me Russia's behavior hasn't changed. Add to that the fact that the French President Emmanuel Macron wants to talk about the Iran nuclear deal and wants to use the G7 to
he took him out.
The U.S. and Iran. The president's going to be sitting down with Prime Minister Boris Johnson of the UK, and they're going to be talking about Brexit and that issue. So it's still early to say how the security issues are going to shake out here.
All right, a lot to keep an eye on. Yamiche Alcindor there reporting for us. The G7 meeting's getting underway tomorrow in Southwest France. Thank you, Yamiche.
Thanks, Judy.
In the day's other news, the government of Brazil moved to deploy troops tomorrow to rein in raging wildfires across the Amazon rainforest. William Brangham reports.
Large parts of the Amazon are being engulfed in record-breaking flames. More than 9,500 fires have broken out this past week. Today, under increasing pressure to address the crisis, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro talked of sending in the army, saying, quote, "That's the plan." He had conceded yesterday that the situation is dire and that his government lacked the resources to fight it.
The Ministry of Justice can send 40 men to combat the fight, but do you understand that? 40 men? There are not enough resources. We are in chaos.
Forest fires are common in Brazil this time of year, but their numbers have skyrocketed to more than 75,000 this year. That's up 80% from 2018. And the smoke from them has turned Sao Paulo's midday skies into total darkness. Bolsonaro has said, with no evidence, that non-profit groups started the fires to undermine him. But scientists point to three main causes, all stemming from human activity, that are really driving this crisis. First, rampant deforestation. A staggering amount of the Amazon rainforest gets cut down intentionally. In June alone, an area half the size of Rhode Island was lost. Much of the logging is illegal and driven by rising agriculture in the region. Fire is routinely used by farmers to clear out the brush for farming and grazing. Droughts have also played a key role. They occur naturally, but scientists say climate change is likely making them worse and more frequent. The right-wing populist president has relaxed environmental protections and prioritized opening up the rainforest for development. Bolsonaro has called the fires an internal matter for Brazilians to resolve, but international pressure for action is mounting. French President Emmanuel Macron plans to highlight the crisis at this weekend's G7 summit with world leaders in France. And Macron threatened to withdraw French support for a trade deal between the European Union and South American countries, including Brazil, if immediate action is not taken. Ireland quickly followed suit. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm William Brangham.
The Assad regime in Syria scored another victory today in its long fight to reclaim control of the country. Government forces seized a cluster of towns in northern Hama province, that is just south of Idlib province, the last major rebel stronghold. A Syrian military offensive in the region has killed more than 2,000 people and forced 500,000 to flee since April. In Hong Kong, pro-democracy protesters formed a human chain tonight. People linked hands across the Chinese territory. Organizers said it extended 25 miles to show solidarity and appeal for international support. It was inspired.
He surrendered.
30 years ago today.
That's funny.
2 million people took part in that event.
Dishonorable, but funny.
Russia's opposition leader Alexei Navalny is free tonight after a month in a Moscow jail.
He knew I had him, that's why.
Without government permission. Russian authorities clamped down on the mass protests earlier this summer, detaining 1,400 people and arresting dozens of leaders. Navalny
Wish I could do something with that money.
Vowing to keep up the pressure and warning of new repression.
Now we see the final stage of degradation of this political regime. They used to exist thanks to lies and falsifications. Now we see that lies and falsifications are not enough. It proves that the authorities have no support. They feel it and fear it.
The protest began after Moscow barred nearly 24 independent candidates from running in city elections next month. They are seen as a possible litmus test for national elections in 2021. Back in this country, the Trump administration asked the U.S. Supreme Court today to rule that federal law does not bar companies from firing workers just because they are gay. The Justice Department argued the 1964 Civil Rights Act was not intended to ban discrimination against gays, lesbians, bisexual, and transgender people. The department made a similar argument last week in a case specific to transgender rights. There is word that Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was treated this month for a tumor on her pancreas. A court statement today said the tumor was malignant, but localized. It said there's no evidence that the disease has spread and no need for additional treatment. Ginsburg is 86. She's had several bouts with cancer since 1999.
Isn't that terrible? Look at that. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I fell for it the first time I played this game. We did so good though. I like making videos for this game. It's the format. It's an easy format.
He was a billionaire businessman, one-time vice presidential nominee, and conservative mega donor. John Yang looks at his life and legacy.
David Koch helped his brother Charles expand the Wichita-based Koch Industries into one of the largest privately held corporations of the world. He quickly became a notable figure in elite New York social circles. The business eventually became the fuel behind one of the highest spending political action groups in modern American politics, Americans for Prosperity.
Americans for Prosperity is responsible for the content of this advertising.
The anti-tax, pro-small government group poured hundreds of millions of dollars into conservative candidates and causes, often through untraceable so-called dark money contributions. The oil and gas-based Coke network spent just under $400 million on the 2012 election, an unparalleled sum at the time that filled the airwaves with attack ads.
Obama's healthcare law is actually one of the largest tax increases in history.
Targeting President Obama and the Affordable Care Act while long denying climate change.
I'm basically a libertarian.
In a 2014 interview with ABC's Barbara Walters, Coke defended his political contributions.
Do you think it's fair that just because you have billions of dollars, you can influence elections?
Well, I contribute to public candidate campaigns, and there is a federal limit on how much you can contribute to each individual candidate. I obey the law in that regard and feel I'm doing it properly.
Limits on corporate donations to political candidates had been lifted 4 years earlier, the result of the Citizens United Supreme Court battle that the brothers had held.
Oh, shit.
The Koch brothers famously did not endorse Donald Trump in 2016 over concerns about free trade, but their group did target several Democratic senators in the 2018 midterm elections. In addition to politics, Koch gave millions to cancer research, some PBS programs, and a full wing of the Smithsonian's Natural History Museum. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm John Yang.
And still to come on the NewsHour, Mark Shield and Ramesh Ponnuru examine how President Trump rattles the financial markets and European allies. The science of giving, what works and what doesn't in aiding the world's poorest individuals. Plus, backstage with Atticus Finch, the star of Broadway's To Kill a Mockingbird, gets into character. As we've been reporting, President Trump continues his disputes with China and the Federal Reserve as economic jitters grow. And 3 Democratic presidential candidates have now bowed out of the 2020 race. Here to help us understand the politics of it all are Shields and Ponnuru. That's syndicated columnist Mark Shields and Ramesh Ponnuru of the National Review. David Brooks is away. And hello to both of you on this Friday night. We've got a lot going on and a lot to talk about. Mark, I'm going to start with you. Today we started out with China announcing higher tariffs on about $75 billion worth of American goods, somewhat expected. But then the president unleashed a barrage of criticisms, not only on China. By the end of the day, he had slapped new tariffs, said he was slapping new tariffs on more than $500 billion worth of Chinese goods. He was attacking the chairman of the Federal Reserve, and on and on. What are we to make of it?
I wish I knew, Julie. I really do. I mean, it's a performance of staggering instability more than anything else. You look at the president attacking his own chairman of the Federal Reserve and comparing, saying that his damage to the United States is greater than that, a greater threat than that of Chairman Xi. Quite honestly, China is a human rights abuser of historic dimensions. There are 1 million people who are Muslims right now in re-education camps. There's religious persecution of what. I mean, this is so unfair, unjust, but in a larger sense, domestically, it's unnerving to the United States, to those who want to invest in the country, employers who want to hire, want to expand. They're looking for predictability, they're looking for stability. They're getting absolutely none of that. 3 times this week, the White House changed its position on tax cut. I wish I knew. I bet Ramesh has a lot better answer.
Massive instability, Ramesh?
Well, the president's tweets today attacking the Federal Reserve Chairman that he himself appointed, declaring China an enemy, but possibly not as much of an enemy as that appointee. Or they were appalling tweets, but one of the points he made was absolutely true, which is that China has abused the trade system, its intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers. Those are real abuses. The problem is Trump has created a problem for himself. He has backed himself into a corner. He has made a big part of his identity that he is going to be the president who, for the first time, takes those abuses seriously, holds the Chinese to account. And he's finding that the way he's done it, going unilaterally going in with vague demands without even a unified team of his own negotiators is not working. And I think that is the frustration that is boiling up in these tweets and now boiling up in actual tariffs.
So if Mark, can we write it off then to just frustration with the problems that he's had inside his administration?
Well, I mean, Judy, every presidency, I've been through 11 of them now, is basically a mirror reflection of the man at the top.
Yeah, that sucked.
At the top, but the strengths and weaknesses of that individual. This is, I mean, Donald Trump, the pattern is familiar by now. He finds somebody, they're the best, because he knows the best, and the best people want to work for him. And he hires them. He praises them to the sky. They get in trouble. He loses confidence. He banishes them to the outer darkness. I mean, outstanding Americans like General Jim Mattis and others have just served their country and been gone. I mean, so the instability begins right at the top.
But I mean, even on top of that, which is something I discussed earlier with Catherine Ramesh, and that is his ordering, in a tweet, ordering American companies to stop doing business with China. I mean,
and of course, presidents can't do that. Presidents don't have that kind of authority. But I suppose if you're the sort of person who thinks that as president you should just be able to say something and it happens, that would add to your frustration.
But does this help him politically, all that?
I don't think so. I think that it is undermining the economy. The reaction of the stock market suggests they don't believe that people with real money on the line do not believe that this is going to produce Chinese concessions that are going to be worth it for the economy going forward. And I do think that as fashionable as it is to say that nothing can dent President Trump's approval ratings, the one thing that could is a weakening economy.
And you're saying this could...
Let me just pick up on Ramesh's point, because I think it's a good one. Judy, the final analysis, it's a personal assessment people make of their president. And it was a very simple four-part question that's been asked for the past 45 years. I like the president personally, and I agree with most of his policies. I like the president personally. Disagree. I dislike the president. Don't agree. Dislike the president. Agree. With Ronald Reagan, 75% of Americans liked him. That's a formidable job when you're trying to unseat somebody.
Whatever they thought.
That's right. Even Bill Clinton, going through the Monica Lewinsky and impeachment, was at 73% approval rating, and with 65% liking him. Donald Trump, with the lowest unemployment in 50 years, has 30% of Americans who like him. So that's the benefit of the doubt he has going. And I really think he's in enormous political trouble, and I think he understands that, and I think that's anxiety generating in him.
Well, let's turn, I mean, there's a lot to say about all that happened today and the Federal Reserve and China, but let's spend a few minutes talking about the Democrats. Ramesh, we lost three more of the, I guess you could say, the candidates who hadn't really caught on this week. Today, Seth Moulton, the congressman from Massachusetts, announced he's not running, but you still have a good 20-plus candidates in the race. Where does this Democratic race stand right now? Has it firmed up? Is it all over the map? How do you see it?
Well, I think that Vice President Biden has shown stronger staying power than people might have thought. Even after that first debate where he seemed to be rattled by Senator Kamala Harris's attack on him, he has maintained his leadership at the polls. He's maintained, I think, very importantly, a multiracial coalition. You don't need one of those to win a Republican presidential nomination. You do to win a Democratic presidential nomination. And right now, he's doing better among blacks and Hispanics than he is among white voters. And there's nobody else really at the top level of the party who can say that they've got a similarly broad coalition. So, he's riding maybe a little too much on electability. Maybe he doesn't have enthusiastic support, but I still think you might rather be him than any of the other candidates.
How do you see this Democratic race?
Well, Bob Strauss, the great Democratic chair, said once that the toughest thing is not to announce that you're running for president, throw your hat in the ring and take a chance. Toughest thing is to admit you've lost and to withdraw. And that takes an awful lot of guts to do it. And so the people who left Hickenlooper in Colorado and Inslee in Washington were people of accomplishment. I mean, they had been governors, they've been mayors, they had a record of achievement. I mean, my bias for executives versus legislators is admitted, And so I think they're a loss to the party in that sense. Congressman Moulton launched a challenge to Nancy Pelosi for the speakership, and that presidential nomination did just about as well. And they all have to get back to trying to get elected, and that's what Mayor Governor Hickenlooper is trying to do right now in Colorado.
So he's running in Colorado.
He's running in Colorado for the Senate. So, I think, Judy, that Ramesh's analysis is pretty solid. Joe Biden is running on electability. The only drawback to electability is you have to win.